into some recommendations that have actually come from a task force that was put together to assess what the Black community would like to see Quebec put forward. And I think it's very important for me to go through these slides. That's why I will ignore the little papers as they come. It's a full-on compilation from so many groups within the Black community that at this point, the only thing I can wonder is, when this study is done in 2006, why am I still having to put these forward as recommendations in 2009? But first and foremost, so the Secretariat du Conseil du Trésor is the, I guess I'll loosely translate, Secretary of the Treasury Council, who would like to see that public sector managers be aware of their responsibilities. They'd like to see that 25% of the hiring objective be departmental instead of across the entire government. So when I say that, for example, if you have one department that hires 40% people from visible minorities and others 5%, no, it should be a minimum 25% across the board. They'd like to see accountability, so publish annual reports and the results of all the hiring so that we can keep an account of what's actually being done. And of course, make a portion of the bonuses of the deputy ministers and agency directors conditional upon reaching those goals. Because perhaps that would make people move a little faster if your paycheck is affected by that, right? In terms of Minister of Justice, again, a request for some transparency and changes to certain sections of the Act respecting equal access to employment in public bodies. The one that's very important here is to note that currently, if you only need to report every 3 or 5 years, things drastically change across the labor movement in a 3 or 5 year period. So annually would be a better way to be a little more transparent. In terms of the overall government, the recommendation was to invite all employers, including unions, companies, nonprofit organizations, associations, and professional orders to ensure a fair representation of Quebecers from visible minorities within the workforce. And especially coming from the House of Labor, it's imperative for us who have the same type of mandate, really, as community activists, to push that agenda at all levels, and it shouldn't only be coming from the ladies on my left and right. In terms of Minister of Labor, make a request that the Commission of Construction in Quebec create a position within its organization to oversee the interests and fair representation of Quebecers and visible minorities within the construction trade, because very, very much are they underrepresented. In terms of the Minister of Education, I know some of you may look at this slide and be a tad confused, but we need to insert the Black History Month program into the calendar. We need to look at pedagogical content, and we need to legislate it to officially recognize February as Black History Month, because although it's been done at the Canadian level, it's not been done in Quebec. In terms of the Minister of Immigration, we would like to see a national communication strategy aimed at the general public to fight against racism and racial discrimination. And again, I say national, but for many people within my province, we consider it our nation. That strategy should consist of the 2 elements that you see there as well. And I'm sorry I'm going through them quickly, but I have papers being put in my face about my countdown. I'll let you go through this a little bit. Again, the annual reporting is something that comes up for the Minister of Immigration as well. But one of the recommendations that came from another study was to support some UN initiatives. First off, to support the International Coalition of Cities Against Racism. Currently, Montreal and Gatineau have already been involved in that, but it's not limited to Quebec. That's every city across the world. It could join that. So you can go back to your city and say, I'd like to join this. All that information is available on the UN website. As well, Canada has not signed the International Convention on the Protection and Rights of All Migrant Workers and members of their families. And just to touch on that really quickly before I get booted off, the seasonal agricultural workers, as well as live-in caregivers that come to Quebec, I mean, they have a very, very, very difficult time. In terms of, there's 5,000 temporary migrant workers that came last year just to do agricultural work. Another 1,000 migrant workers that came to Quebec to do the live-in caregiver work. And 98% of them are women. So it's not just an issue of ethnicity, it's an issue of gender as well. 75% of those women come from the Philippines, and the remaining large percent come from Africa. Most of them, I have here the statistic, 33% have a university degree, 37%, if not university, have a certificate, and yet they're unable to perform what they need to perform in order to receive permanent status. You need to work. You must complete 24 months worth of work within a 36-month period for you to be allowed to even apply for permanent residencies. And so that makes it very, very difficult for these workers, especially when in the province of Quebec, a lot of the testing that you need to do is also going to have the linguistic component added to it. I know that for the seasonal agricultural workers, that's not just a Quebec issue as well. It's also very prominent in Alberta as well. And they can only be here for a maximum of 8 months. The treatment that they receive is often quite horrible. At the FTQ, there were reports that came in about the housing situation, for example. And when you come in, you do have to follow the rules of the person that brings you there. So as an extreme example, but one that has happened, if they say, well, your housing is in my bedroom, then your housing is in that person's bedroom. If you call tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm actually feeling sick, I have an illness, I need an ambulance. An ambulance is a government service, and you have no right to a government service. Doctors, for us, you don't have certain rights to see certain specialists. You also can be turned away and sent back home at any time. If you turn around and say, well, I've been diagnosed with cancer, then I can say that's really unfortunate. You're gonna be leaving tomorrow, by the way. So it's just things that we need to look at and take into account. And my time is up, but I just want to say thank you so much to everybody that has taken labor into account. You need to help us help you. We need some fresh faces that come and help on our campaigns. When you see people on the picket line, please support them. When you see a pamphlet like the Sisters pamphlet of Made in Canada, please take it seriously, because the more these jobs depart, it's hard enough trying to help people keep good employment and be recognized, but it's even more difficult when our jobs are being exported. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Isabel talked about the fact that recommendations were put in place in 2006, and she's still talking about it in 2009. At the Canadian Labour Congress, our Anti-Racism Task Force put in place recommendations in 1998, and in 2009, one out of all the recommendations, whether it's through the criminal justice system, housing, education, justice, etc., one has been implemented. So we really need to keep ourselves in check, but we need you to keep us in check as well. With respect to the employment equity legislation that's happening in Quebec, again, if Quebec can do it and the UK, which has it in legislation, can do it, then there's no reason why the Canadian government can't do it. There are issues around enforcement, yes, but at least it's there, and it also holds unions to account. So those things are important.